we're looking at laying roof sheets. We're doing a review of the AS 1562.1 and the HB 39 2015. Well, we're not going to specifically quote them, we're not going to specifically show you the pictures of the standards anymore, because we just want to be sure that we don't breach any copyright licenses. So I suggest everybody, before you do anything, as I have all along, seek independent legal and technical advice before acting on anything you see in these videos. It's just general and they're just a review. And I encourage you, go to Standards Australia and buy yourself a copy of those standards that I've been talking about in my last few videos. So today we're looking at roof sheets and how to install them. Well, I have an example here. I have some corrugated iron. Yeah, I've just got a piece from the rubbish pile. We're going to look at it. So this is corrugated iron. Trim decks obviously different, and so is clip lock. Just so you know, some technical words we'll be using today. The crest of the sheet, or the crest of the sheet, is the top of this rib. We have the pan of the sheet that applies to trim deck and to corrugated and to clip lock. So that's the crest, that's the pan of the sheet. So another one that we'll be looking at is when we lay sheets, we'll be talking about also the creep. The creep of the sheet is another technical term where the bottom edge of the sheet, that edge, when it goes into the gutter, when we're laying it, we have to be mindful of the creep. So creeps when a sheet runs uphill or downhill as we're laying it across the fascia, the back of the gutter. So I thought I'd just show you guys that as well before I start. So what types of fixings, or what types of sheets are there? Well, most commonly, as I've just shown you, there's corrugated, there's trim deck. Both of those are generally pierced fixed. So pierced fixed means that it's used, a fixing is used to go through the top of the crest of the sheet into the support member below. There's also concealed fixed. So concealed fixed is usually like clip lock or something like that. There are other types, of sheets that have a similar type of fixing principle behind them. So what does the standards talk about when laying sheets? Well, we've got the pierced fixed and the concealed fixed sheets. Each of those cladding choices should always be installed, as the AS 3500.3 says, to withstand a 1 in 100 year storm event. Now, with all the natural disasters that have occurred, some of those things might be getting reviewed at the moment, but at the moment, that's the current standard, a 1 in 100 year event. It should also take into account any cladding choice you use, distances from ocean, distances from industrial sites. Look at the manufacturer specifications, because these things give you really good help as to how you should use their product. So now that we have those technical terms sort of mentioned out there, we're going to look at the actual laying of the sheet. Well, when you lay the sheet, the standards there, both the SAHB 39 and the AS 1562 talk about that. In general, when we're laying sheets, the very minimum overhang that the bottom of a sheet should have over into the back of the gutter is 50 millimeters. So that's the very minimum that it should be. Why is that? Well, it needs to be at least 50 millimeters and of a sufficient pitch that a capillary action does not occur. So that is where you have a sheet, the water runs down the sheet. Capillary action, in one sense, is also talking about when the water can wrap around and go up and inside the building. So you want to have enough overhang that it prevents capillary action occurring or minimizes it. When you've got a trim deck or a clip lock type system and there are some flatter edges on the pans, you should always turn them down a minimum of 20 millimeters. Now the standards refer to 20 millimeters and a 45-degree pitch turn. Now whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. That's for you guys to decide. That's why we're looking at it as a review today. Now, valleys. Now, how much should sheets go into valleys? Well, whether or not you or I agree with it, and this is up for debate really, they should overhang into the valleys no less than 100 millimeters. So you might look at a valley and go, oh, that's a bit average, it's a bit crooked. Well, when laying into a valley, it should be at least 100 millimeters. So that's the point. Remember, when you're fixing a sheet as well, it should always try to be on the crest of the sheet, so on the top of the sheet. You should pull a fixing into the sheet so as not to damage the fixing or damage the performance of the fixing and distort the sheet. You don't want to do that. So just enough pressure that you're not going to damage your sheet or distort the washer. Now, it doesn't mean you've got to go over for a tension wrench and check the pressure of each sheet. That might be a bit unreasonable, but just check that they're not too much or not enough. Also, as you're laying the sheets, remember we spoke about this at the start, be mindful of the creep of the sheet. So as you're laying, guys, you'll quite often notice, and I'll get my sheet back again, you'll quite often notice that when you're laying a sheet, you've got your sheet there, and it's laying in the gutter, and on one edge, could be the overlap or the unlap, you might have a 50 mil mark or a 60 mil, or some people go 70 or whatever it is. That mark you put on the edge of your sheet normally will go into the gutter and should stay consistently sort of the same. Occasionally you'll find that it might want to go up toward the roof or down into the gutter. That's called creep. Now be mindful, it's not defective if the sheet looks like it does this, but it can't go below the minimum overhang of 50 millimeters. Just remember that. The other thing you've got to be mindful of, and it's something very important, is when you're laying, say, you're doing a commercial job or a roof that's got box gutters, you've got to be mindful of the maximum overhang as well. So that there is a minimum of 50 millimeters, but there's also a maximum, and that you'll find on the manufacturer's specifications. You might need a stiffening edge or something like that if it goes too far in, so be very careful of that as well. That's called a maximum unsupported overhang, I believe. So here's a couple of common areas as well. We're going to look at some common defects that I get asked about quite a lot as my work. So quite often I get asked to look at a roof and look up a valley or at the bottom of sheets, and you'll see sheets that are stepped. So in Queensland, it's quite often referred to as sawtoothing or stepping, and other states, I'm pretty sure it's called that as well. Done some work in New South Wales as a roofer, and I remember the same terminology was used, sawtoothing or stepping. Now, while that's not actually defective, we've got to make sure, once again, that it doesn't exceed the maximum unsupported overhang or the minimum overhang as well. Very important that whilst it's not technically a defect, just be mindful it doesn't exceed it or go past those minimums, because then it might be an issue. Another huge one that I get asked a lot, this is a massive one, is particularly out valleys or other area like ship end, like houses with gable ends that have sort of an angle that come out like a ship's bow, is people when they cut the sheet, they got jagged edges on them. How should that be? Like, is that a defect? Because I quite often see that people get into disputes over jagged edges and rough, looking cuts. Well, guys, to be honest with you, it's not defective. If a sheet's got jagged, like it can have fish hooks all over it, unless it's specified somewhere by the manufacturer, there is always an allowance for fish hooks or jagged edges and some sawtoothing. Even if I don't like it and you don't like it, that's just what the standards say. So the standards do suggest, though, that a clean, sharp edge with minimum swarf is ideal. So don't go and do a rough job, guys. Try and keep it good quality. But just remember, if it comes down to the crunch, it's not actually defective workmanship if you've got jagged edges and that type of thing on the sheet. Swarf and scratches are huge. This is the last bit I'm going to look at. It's huge. It's a massive cause of complaints and defective building work. Well, I recommend you all look at the technical bulletins produced by BlueScope. Now, the SAHB 39 and the AS 1562 talk about keeping your work clean as you go. So whether that's blowing or washing it each day or how often you're supposed to do it, you're gonna inadvertently get swarf on a sheet at some point. It happens. Every roof's got some on it in some area. Look at the technical bulletins, and this is no joke. Get a solicitor. If there's a dispute, go to a solicitor for whatever the fee costs and show them the technical bulletins. Get them to interpret the wording in it. It's better a solicitor tells you what the wording means and how to apply it, because that's going to come down to looking at how severe it is and those other type of things. So it's important that the wording in the technical bulletins and in the standards you really understand. You should always get a solicitor to do that. So guys, these are some of the basic areas of laying sheets and installing sheets and some of the disputes that arise over it. I'd really love to see some of your feedback and see what you think, whether you agree or not with the standards, because after all, it is a review. Thanks for your time, and next time I'm going to show you some pictures of roofs and see if you can pick the defects in them. It'll be exciting. Thank you.